Snow White, echoes of eternity. The whispers of destiny. In the twilight realm where reality and magic intertwine, there exists a tale that has echoed through the ages, its true nature obscured by the mists of time and the sanitizing touch of those who fear the raw power of uncensored storytelling. This, dear reader, is not the Snow White of your childhood. This is a story of darkness and light, of desire and sacrifice, of the brutal beauty of a world where every shadow holds a secret and every whisper carries the weight of prophecy. As you embark upon this journey, be warned, the path ahead is treacherous, filled with truths that may shake the very foundation of your understanding. But for those brave enough to venture forth, rewards beyond imagining await. For in these pages, you will find not just a story, but a key to unlock the hidden chambers of your own heart, to awaken the slumbering magic that lies dormant within us all. Listen closely, for the whispering woods call your name. Can you hear it? The rustle of leaves in a wind that doesn't exist, the soft laughter of beings just beyond the veil of your perception. They beckon you deeper, promising revelations that will change you forever. Are you ready to step into a world where beauty can be the deadliest weapon, where true love is forged in the crucible of unimaginable trials, and where the line between hero and villain blurs with each turning page? Take a deep breath, steel your nerves, and let the tendrils of this tale wrap around your mind. For once you begin, there's no turning back. The story of Snow White, as it truly happened, demands to be told. And you, dear reader, have been chosen to bear witness. Now, let us peel back the layers of time and illusion and reveal the truth that lies at the heart of it all. The price of a wish. Queen Isolde stood at her frost-laden window, her breath creating delicate patterns on the glass as winter's first snowflakes danced outside. Her fingers, adorned with rings of ancient power, worked tirelessly on an embroidery depicting the Tree of Life. The silence of her chambers was broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the soft whisper of thread through fabric. Isolde was a woman of otherworldly beauty, her raven hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of midnight, her skin as pale as moonlight on fresh snow. But it was her eyes that truly captivated, deep pools of emerald that seemed to hold secrets from beyond the veil of mortal understanding. As fate would have it, the needle slipped, drawing 3 drops of blood that fell onto the snow-covered ebony windowsill. Isolde watched, transfixed, as the crimson drops spread, a stark contrast against the pristine white. In that moment, a longing so profound it seemed to echo through the very stones of the castle overcame her. Isolde closed her eyes, her lips moving in a silent prayer to powers older than the kingdom itself. "I desire a child," she breathed, her voice a mixture of hope and trepidation. "A daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony." Unknown to Isolde, her wish reverberated through the fabric of reality, stirring ancient forces that had long slumbered in the depths of the whispering woods. The Fae, creatures of myth and magic, recognized the birth of a pivotal moment in the grand tapestry of fate. Deep in the heart of the forest, in a glade hidden from mortal eyes, a council of ethereal beings gathered. Their forms shifted and shimmered, as if unable to decide on a single shape. "The queen has made her wish," spoke a voice like the rustle of leaves in a summer breeze. "The thread of destiny has been plucked." "Indeed," replied another, this one reminiscent of winter's chill. "But every wish has its price. The balance must be maintained." A third voice, ancient and resonant, cut through the discussion. "The child will be born, as foretold. But the queen's life force shall be the cost. It is necessary." Silence fell over the glade, heavy with the weight of the decision made. The fate of a kingdom, perhaps even the world, had been set in motion with a single wish and 3 drops of blood. Back in the castle, oblivious to the forces she had set in motion, Isolde felt a shiver run down her spine. For a moment, she could have sworn she heard whispers in a language older than time itself. But as quickly as it came, the sensation passed, leaving her to wonder if it had been nothing more than her imagination. As the months passed, Isolde's belly swelled with new life. The kingdom rejoiced, for an heir would secure the future of the realm. But with each passing day, the queen's strength seemed to wane. Her skin grew paler, her steps more labored, and her emerald eyes took on a haunted look, as if she could see something beyond the veil of mortal perception. King Leopold, a man more versed in matters of state than matters of the heart, watched his wife's decline with growing concern. He summoned healers from across the land, offered prayers to every deity known, but nothing seemed to halt Isolde's inexorable fading. On the night of the winter solstice, as the longest night of the year wrapped the kingdom in darkness, Queen Isolde went into labor. The castle buzzed with nervous energy as midwives and healers rushed to and fro, their worried whispers echoing through the stone corridors. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, a cry pierced the air, the strong, healthy wail of a newborn princess. But even as joy spread through the castle, a pall of sorrow descended upon the royal chambers. Queen Isolde, her strength all but spent, cradled her daughter in trembling arms. The child was everything she had wished for, skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and a dusting of hair as black as ebony atop her tiny head. "My Snow White," Isolde whispered, her voice barely audible. "My perfect, beautiful girl." With the last vestiges of her strength, Isolde reached for a silver locket that lay on the bedside table. It was an ancient thing, passed down through generations of her family, said to hold powerful protective magic. As she clasped it around her daughter's neck, Isolde began to whisper an incantation, her words growing fainter with each syllable. "Blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh. In this locket, my essence rests. Guard and guide through dark and light. Forever bound to my Snow White." With these final words, Queen Isolde breathed her last, her spirit seeming to shimmer in the air for a moment before dissipating like mist in the morning sun. King Leopold, who had been pacing outside the chamber, burst in at the sound of renewed wailing, not from the infant princess, but from the midwives who had witnessed the queen's passing. He took in the scene before him, his wife, still and pale upon the bed, and the tiny bundle that represented both his greatest joy and his deepest sorrow. As he cradled his daughter, tears streaming down his face, Leopold made a silent vow. He would protect this child with every fiber of his being, no matter the cost. For in her, a piece of his beloved Isolde lived on. Little did he know that far greater forces than he could imagine were already at work, setting in motion a chain of events that would shape not just the fate of his daughter, but the very future of the realm itself. In the Whispering Woods, the Fae Council convened once more, their ethereal forms shimmering with an otherworldly light. "It is done," intoned the ancient voice. "The first piece has been placed upon the board." "And what of the darkness that stirs in the east?" asked the voice of winter. "The one who seeks to upset the balance?" A heavy silence fell over the glade before the voice of summer responded, "That, my friends, is where the true test will lie. For every light casts a shadow, and it is in that shadow that our little Snow White will face her greatest challenges." As if in response to these portentous words, a cold wind swept through the forest, causing even the ancient trees to shudder. The stage was set, the players chosen. A tale of magic, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness was about to unfold, one that would be whispered about for generations to come. The shadows lengthened. Years passed, and the kingdom mourned and then slowly began to heal from the loss of their beloved queen. Snow White grew into a curious and kind-hearted child, her laughter echoing through the castle halls like a balm to the souls of all who heard it. The silver locket, a constant presence around her neck, seemed to shimmer with an inner light whenever the young princess was particularly happy or in need of comfort. King Leopold, though he loved his daughter dearly, found himself increasingly withdrawn from both his child and his kingdom. The loss of Isolde had left a void in his heart that nothing seemed able to fill. He spent long hours in his study, poring over ancient texts and consulting with scholars from distant lands, searching for something. Though he never spoke of it, those closest to him suspected he sought a way to bring back his lost love, or at least to communicate with her spirit. It was during one of these research sessions, on the eve of Snow White's 7th birthday, that a knock came at the castle gates. The guards, surprised by the late-night visitor, were even more taken aback when they opened the doors to reveal a woman of such stunning beauty that it seemed to physically pain them to look upon her. This was Ravenna, though none in the kingdom yet knew her name or the darkness that she would bring. Her hair was like spun gold, her eyes the color of honey, and her skin seemed to glow with an inner light. But there was something in the set of her jaw, the calculating look in her eyes, that hinted at a hardness beneath the beautiful exterior. "I seek audience with the king," Ravenna announced, her voice melodious yet commanding. "I bring knowledge from the Far East that may be of great interest to him." The guards, still dazed by her presence, could do nothing but comply. They escorted her through the torchlit corridors, her every step graceful and purposeful, like a predator stalking its prey. When Ravenna entered King Leopold's study, it was as if all the air had been sucked from the room. The king, who had not truly looked at another woman since Isolde's passing, found himself transfixed. There was something in Ravenna's eyes that spoke of hidden depths, of secrets that aligned all too well with his own desperate searches. "Your Majesty," Ravenna began, dropping into a curtsy that was both elegant and subtly provocative. "I have traveled far, bearing knowledge of magics that bridge the gap between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. I believe I may be able to help you with the longings of your heart." Leopold, his defenses weakened by years of grief and obsession, was putty in Ravenna's hands. Over the next few weeks, she became a fixture in the castle, her influence growing with each passing day. She spoke of rituals that could commune with the dead, of artifacts that could store a soul's essence. And with each revelation, Leopold's obsession grew. Snow White, now a precocious 7-year-old, watched these developments with a mixture of curiosity and unease. There was something about Ravenna that set her on edge, a feeling she couldn't quite articulate, but that made her silver locket feel cold against her skin whenever the beautiful stranger was near. One night, unable to sleep, Snow White crept from her chambers, drawn by the sound of voices coming from her father's study. Peeking through a crack in the door, she witnessed a scene that would haunt her for years to come. Ravenna stood before an ornate mirror, its frame adorned with intricate carvings of twisting vines and screaming faces. As Snow White watched, Ravenna's reflection seemed to ripple and change, revealing glimpses of other places, other times. And when Ravenna spoke, her voice was different, colder, filled with a power that made the very air crackle with energy. "Mirror, mirror on the wall," Ravenna intoned, "show me the one who threatens my thrall." The mirror's surface swirled like smoke before clearing to reveal an image of Snow White herself, older, more beautiful, surrounded by a nimbus of pure white light. Ravenna's face contorted with rage and fear. "No," she hissed. "I will not be undone by a mere child." It was then that Snow White's locket gave a painful pulse, hot enough to make her gasp. The sound alerted Ravenna, who whirled towards the door with inhuman speed. But Snow White, driven by an instinct she didn't understand, was already fleeing down the corridor, her heart pounding in her ears. From that night forward, everything changed. Ravenna's mask of benevolence slipped more often, revealing glimpses of the ruthless creature beneath. King Leopold, once a strong and just ruler, became little more than a puppet, his every decision guided by Ravenna's whispered counsel. And Snow White? She learned to watch, to listen, to keep her growing suspicions to herself. The locket became her constant companion, a source of comfort and, though she didn't yet realize it, protection against the dark forces that were tightening their grip on the kingdom. As the years passed, Snow White blossomed into a young woman of exceptional beauty and kindness. Her presence was like a ray of sunshine in the increasingly gloomy castle, and the common folk adored her. This, of course, only served to fuel Ravenna's jealousy and fear. On the eve of Snow White's 18th birthday, Ravenna stood once more before her magical mirror, her face a mask of cold determination. "Mirror, mirror, on the wall," she commanded, "who is the fairest of them all?" For the first time in years, the mirror's answer changed. The smoky surface cleared to reveal Snow White, radiant and pure, her beauty now eclipsing even Ravenna's carefully cultivated allure. Ravenna's scream of rage echoed through the castle, shattering windows and sending guards rushing to investigate. But by the time they arrived, the beautiful advisor was once more the picture of composure, weaving a tale of an assassin who had been lurking in the shadows. In the chaos that followed, no one noticed as Ravenna slipped away, summoning her most trusted and most dangerous servant. Eric the Huntsman was a man with a past as dark and tangled as the Whispering Woods themselves. Once a celebrated warrior, he had lost everything: his wife, his child, his honor, in a war orchestrated by power-hungry nobles. Now, he served Ravenna, finding a twisted sense of purpose in carrying out her dark bidding. "Bring me her heart," Ravenna commanded, her voice dripping with malice. "And I shall grant you the one thing your soul truly desires, oblivion." As Eric set out on his grim mission, Snow White, blissfully unaware of the danger heading her way, made a fateful decision. Guided by a mix of instinct and the warm pulse of her mother's locket, she decided it was time to uncover the truth about Ravenna and the dark cloud that had fallen over her beloved kingdom. Little did she know that her quest for answers would lead her into the heart of the Whispering Woods, where ancient magics stirred and beings of legend awaited. The true tale of Snow White was about to unfold, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the power of a pure heart in a world teeming with shadows. Into the Whispering Woods. The dawn broke cold and gray over the kingdom, a fitting backdrop for the dark deeds about to unfold. Snow White, her heart heavy with the weight of her suspicions and the responsibility she felt towards her people, made her way to the castle stables. She had decided to seek out the wise woman who was said to dwell on the edges of the Whispering Woods, hoping to find answers about Ravenna's true nature and how to break the spell that seemed to hold her father in thrall. As she saddled her horse, a white mare named Luna, Snow White's fingers brushed against the silver locket. A warmth spread through her, and for a moment she could have sworn she heard her mother's voice whispering words of encouragement. Steeling her resolve, she mounted Luna and set off, the castle disappearing into the morning mist behind her. Unbeknownst to Snow White, Eric the Huntsman was already on her trail. Years of tracking both man and beast had honed his skills to near supernatural levels. He moved through the early morning shadows like a ghost, his eyes never leaving the faint tracks left by Snow White's horse. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Snow White found herself at the edge of the Whispering Woods. The forest loomed before her, ancient trees stretching towards the heavens, their branches intertwining to create a canopy that seemed to pulse with its own life force. The very air felt different here, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Luna nickered nervously, picking up on her rider's apprehension. Snow White patted the mare's neck reassuringly, though her own heart was racing. "It's all right, girl," she murmured. We have to do this. For Father, for the kingdom, for all of us." With a deep breath, Snow White urged Luna forward, and they crossed the invisible threshold into the Whispering Woods. The moment they entered, the world seemed to shift. The light took on a greenish hue, filtering through leaves that seemed to move even when there was no breeze. And the whispers, oh, the whispers. They started as soon as she entered, a cacophony of voices speaking in languages both familiar and utterly alien. Snow White pressed on, trying to focus on the faint path ahead rather than the disorienting sounds around her. She had heard tales of travelers becoming lost in these woods, wandering for days only to emerge years later, if they emerged at all. Her hand went to the locket, drawing comfort from its steady warmth against her skin. As the day wore on, Snow White began to feel as though the forest was watching her. Eyes seemed to peer from every shadow, and more than once she caught glimpses of movement just at the edge of her vision. When she turned to look, however, there was nothing there but trees and underbrush. It was late afternoon when Snow White heard the sound of running water. Relieved at the prospect of rest and refreshment, she guided Luna towards the source. They emerged into a small clearing where a crystal-clear stream bubbled over moss-covered rocks. Snow White dismounted, letting Luna drink her fill while she cupped her hands to bring water to her own parched lips. As she straightened, wiping water from her chin, Snow White froze. There, on the other side of the stream, stood a magnificent stag. Its coat was the color of moonlight, and its antlers seemed to glow with an inner light. But it was the creature's eyes that truly captivated her, deep pools of wisdom that seemed to hold the secrets of the forest itself. For a long moment, Snow White and the stag regarded each other in silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, the stag inclined its head towards her. Snow White, acting on instinct, curtsied in return. As she rose, she could have sworn she saw approval in those ancient eyes. Suddenly, the stag's head snapped up, its ears twitching. It gave Snow White one last, intense look before bounding away into the forest. A heartbeat later, Snow White heard what had startled the creature, the sound of approaching footsteps. Her hand flew to the dagger at her belt, a gift from her weapons master on her 16th birthday. "Who's there?" she called, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Show yourself." From the shadows of the trees emerged a man unlike any Snow White had ever seen. He was tall and powerfully built, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the haunted look in his eyes and the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. He was dressed in leathers and furs, with an array of weapons strapped to his body. This, Snow White realized with a chill, must be Eric the huntsman. Well, Eric said, his voice a low growl. The little princess, all alone in the big, bad woods. Didn't anyone ever tell you it's dangerous out here? Snow White raised her chin defiantly, though her heart was pounding. I am not afraid, she declared, her voice steadier than she felt. I am Snow White, daughter of King Leopold, and I demand to know why you're following me. A mirthless chuckle escaped Eric's lips. Demand, is it? Oh, you're a brave one, I'll give you that. But bravery won't save you from what's coming, princess. As he spoke, Eric began to circle around the stream, moving towards Snow White with the fluid grace of a predator. Snow White backed away, keeping the stream between them. Her mind raced, searching for a way out of this situation. Whatever Ravenna has promised you, whatever she's told you, it's a lie, Snow White said, her voice urgent. She's evil, can't you see that? She's destroying my father, my kingdom. Eric paused, a flicker of something passing across his face. For a moment, Snow White dared to hope her words had reached him. But then his expression hardened once more. Evil? Maybe. But aren't we all, in the end? Eric's hand went to the axe at his belt. Your heart for my oblivion, princess. It's nothing personal, just the way of the world. As Eric lunged forward, Snow White's locket suddenly blazed with heat. A blinding flash of white light erupted from it, momentarily stunning the huntsman. Snow White, acting on pure instinct, vaulted onto Luna's back and spurred the mare into motion. They thundered through the forest, branches whipping past them as Luna navigated the twisting path with sure-footed speed. Behind them, Snow White could hear Eric crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. The chase seemed to go on forever, the forest blurring around them as Luna galloped deeper and deeper into the heart of the Whispering Woods. Snow White clung to the mare's mane, her eyes wide with fear and exhilaration. She had no idea where they were going, but something told her that Luna did. Suddenly, the trees ahead parted, revealing a sheer cliff face. Snow White pulled back on the reins, but Luna didn't slow. Instead, the mare gathered herself and leapt, sailing over the edge of the cliff. Snow White screamed, certain they were plummeting to their doom. But instead of falling, they floated. The air around them shimmered with an iridescent light, and Snow White felt as though they were being cradled by invisible hands. They drifted down, 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 finally touching ground in a hidden valley that seemed to glow with its own inner light. As Snow White slid from Luna's back on shaky legs, she heard a chorus of gasps. Looking up, she found herself surrounded by a group of beings unlike any she had ever seen or imagined. They were clearly not human, their forms shimmering and changing even as she looked at them. One of them, taller than the rest and emanating an aura of ancient wisdom, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome, Snow White," it said. "We have been expecting you. The time has come for you to learn the truth of who you are and the role you must play in the battle to come." Snow White, her mind reeling from the events of the day, could only stare in wonder. She had sought answers, and it seemed she had found them, though she suspected they would lead to even more questions. As the strange beings surrounded her, each seeming eager to share their knowledge, Snow White felt a mix of fear and excitement. Her journey, she realized, was only just beginning. And somewhere in the depths of the Whispering Woods, Eric the Huntsman was still in pursuit, driven by Ravenna's dark command. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the fate of not just Snow White and her kingdom, but of the entire realm of magic that existed alongside the world of mortals. The true test of Snow White's courage, compassion, and the power hidden within her was about to begin. The Seven Guardians. As the ethereal beings led Snow White deeper into the hidden valley, the young princess felt as though she had stepped into another world entirely. The air here was different, charged with an energy that made her skin tingle. Flowers of impossible colors bloomed everywhere, their petals seeming to glow from within. And the trees. Snow White could have sworn they were watching her, their ancient branches creaking as they turned to follow her progress. The tall being who had first greeted her walked at her side, its form constantly shifting between that of an elderly man with a flowing white beard and a young woman with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from the very air around them. "You have many questions, young one," it said, the words resonating in Snow White's mind as much as in her ears. "And we have much to tell you. But first, you must meet the others." As they crested a small hill, Snow White gasped. Before her lay a clearing unlike anything she had ever seen. 7 standing stones, each easily twice her height, formed a perfect circle. Within the circle, 7 beings stood waiting, each as unique and otherworldly as her guide. Behold, her guide announced, the 7 guardians of the Whispering Woods. One by one, the guardians stepped forward to introduce themselves. First came Doc, a being whose form seemed to be composed entirely of swirling runes and glyphs. His long beard, Snow White realized with a start, was actually made up of tiny, constantly moving symbols. When he spoke, his voice was like the rustling of ancient parchment. "Welcome, child of prophecy," Doc intoned. "Long have we awaited your coming." Next was Grumpy, a creature that seemed to be carved from the very bedrock of the earth. His craggy face wore a perpetual scowl, but Snow White sensed a deep well of loyalty beneath the gruff exterior. "Humph," Grumpy grunted, eyeing Snow White skeptically. "Let's hope you're made of sterner stuff than you look, girl. Dark times are coming." Happy bounded forward next, his form a constantly shifting kaleidoscope of colors. His laughter was like music, and Snow White felt her spirits lifting just being near him. "Oh, how wonderful to meet you at last," Happy exclaimed, his voice filled with genuine joy. "We're going to have such adventures together." Sleepy drifted forward, his misty form barely holding a coherent shape. His eyes were closed, but Snow White had the distinct impression he was seeing far more than any of them. When he spoke, it was in a dreamy whisper that nonetheless carried clearly to her ears. "The threads of fate, they converge around you," Sleepy murmured. "Such possibilities, such dangers." Bashful approached next, his form seeming to flicker in and out of visibility. One moment he was there, a shy smile on his face. The next, he was nothing more than a shimmer in the air. "Hello," Bashful stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's an honor to meet you, Princess." Sneezy erupted into the circle in a whirlwind of leaves and petals. His form was constantly in motion, swirling and reforming with each breath. "Ah, ah, achoo!" Sneezy's sneeze sent a burst of wind through the clearing, ruffling Snow White's hair. "Oh, excuse me. It's just so exciting to finally meet you." Finally, Dopey stepped forward. Of all the guardians, he was the most difficult for Snow White to focus on. His form seemed to be composed of pure magical energy, shifting and changing so rapidly that it made her eyes water to look at him directly. Dopey didn't speak, but a series of images and emotions flashed through Snow White's mind, conveying a sense of welcome and excitement. As Snow White looked around at the 7 guardians, a mixture of awe and trepidation filled her. These beings were clearly ancient and powerful, far beyond anything she had ever encountered. And yet, they were looking at her with expressions ranging from hope to expectation to outright adoration. I don't understand," Snow White said, her voice small in the face of such otherworldly presence. "Who are you? What am I doing here? And what does this all have to do with Ravenna and the danger to my kingdom?" The tall being who had guided her here stepped into the circle, its form settling into that of the elderly man. "All will be explained, dear child," it said, its voice gentle but filled with an undercurrent of urgency. "But first, you must understand who you truly are. For you, Snow White, are far more than just a princess. You are the culmination of a prophecy as old as these woods themselves. You are the one who will bring balance to the realms of magic and mortality, the key to defeating the darkness that threatens to engulf us all." Snow White's head spun with this revelation. She opened her mouth to protest, to say there must be some mistake, but at that moment her locket gave a pulse of warmth. As she reached for it, the clasp suddenly sprang open of its own accord. A shower of silvery mist erupted from the locket, coalescing into a shimmering form that Snow White recognized instantly, though she had never seen her in life. "Mother," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. The spectral form of Queen Isolde smiled, reaching out a hand to caress Snow White's cheek. Though she couldn't physically feel the touch, Snow White felt a warmth spread through her entire being. "My darling girl," Isolde's voice was like a half-remembered lullaby. "How I've longed to speak with you. There is so much you need to know, so much I wish I could have told you myself. But time grows short and the darkness gathers. You must listen to the guardians, learn from them. Embrace your destiny, my love, for in you lies the hope of all the realms." As Isolde's form began to fade, Snow White reached out, trying desperately to hold on to this moment with the mother she had never known. "Wait! Don't go!" she cried. "I have so many questions." Isolde's smile was tinged with sadness as she disappeared back into the locket. "I am always with you, my Snow White. In your heart, in your very blood. Trust in yourself and in the power of love. It is stronger than any magic, darker than any shadow." As the last wisps of Isolde's form vanished, Snow White turned back to the guardians, her eyes shining with unshed tears, but also with a new determination. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Tell me what I need to know to save my father, my kingdom, and to stop Ravenna once and for all." The guardians exchanged glances, a mix of approval and concern in their otherworldly eyes. Doc stepped forward, his runic beard swirling with increased intensity. "Very well, child of prophecy," he said. "But be warned, the path ahead is fraught with danger. The knowledge we impart may change you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Are you certain you are ready?" Snow White squared her shoulders, feeling the weight of destiny settling upon them. "I am ready," she declared. "For my people, for my family, for all the realms, I am ready." As the guardians gathered around her, their forms beginning to glow with an inner light, Snow White felt a sense of both fear and exhilaration. She was about to embark on a journey of discovery that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her world, and the very nature of magic itself. Little did she know that far above, at the edge of the cliff from which she had made her miraculous leap, Eric the huntsman stood watching. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, determination, confusion, and a growing sense that he was on the wrong side of a battle far greater than he had ever imagined. As Eric turned away from the cliff, his mind racing with doubts and half-formed plans, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of both the mortal and magical realms. The true test of Snow White's newfound knowledge and power was about to begin. Lessons in magic and destiny. In the days that followed, Snow White's world expanded in ways she could never have imagined. The hidden valley, which she learned was called the Heart of the Woods, became her classroom. Each of the 7 guardians took turns instructing her, imparting knowledge that had been hidden from mortal eyes for millennia. Doc taught her the language of runes, showing her how to trace symbols in the air that could manipulate the very fabric of reality. Under his tutelage, Snow White learned to create barriers of pure energy, to heal minor wounds with a touch, and to see through illusions that would fool even the most discerning eye. "Remember," Doc would say, his runic beard swirling with excitement, "magic is not just about power. It's about understanding the connections between all things. The runes are a key to unlocking those connections." Grumpy's lessons were perhaps the most physically demanding. He taught Snow White to listen to the voice of the earth itself, to draw strength from the rocks and de-soil beneath her feet. His training often left her exhausted and covered in dirt, but with each passing day, Snow White felt a deepening connection to the natural world around her. The earth endures, Grumpy would growl as he taught her to stand firm against magical attacks. Be like the mountain, unmovable, unshakable. Let the darkness break against you like waves on a cliff. Happy's lessons were perhaps the most surprising. He taught Snow White about the power of joy and laughter, showing her how positive emotions could be channeled into potent magical energy. Even in the darkest times, Happy would say, his kaleidoscopic form shimmering with mirth, a single moment of true happiness can light the way. Never underestimate the power of a smile, dear Snow White. Sleepy's teachings were often cryptic, coming in the form of shared dreams and visions. He showed Snow White glimpses of possible futures, teaching her to navigate the twisting paths of prophecy without losing herself in the myriad possibilities. The future is not set in stone, Sleepy would murmur, his misty form swirling around her. But neither is it infinitely malleable. Learn to see the threads of fate, and you may yet weave a tapestry of your own choosing. Bashful instructed Snow White in the arts of stealth and misdirection. Under his guidance, she learned to blend with shadows, to move silently through even the densest underbrush, and to cast illusions that could fool even the keenest observer. Sometimes, Bashful would whisper, flickering in and out of visibility, the greatest power lies in not being seen at all. Learn when to hide, when to watch, and when to reveal yourself. Sneezy's lessons were perhaps the most unpredictable. He taught Snow White about the magic of change and transformation, showing her how to ride the winds of fate and adapt to rapidly shifting circumstances. Life is chaos, Sneezy would exclaim between sneezes that caused miniature whirlwinds. Magic is chaos. Embrace it, dance with it, and you'll never be caught off guard again. Dopey's teachings were the most abstract and, in many ways, the most profound. Though he never spoke, he communicated directly with Snow White's mind, showing her the underlying currents of magic that flowed through all things. Under his tutelage, Snow White began to see the world in an entirely new way, perceiving the interconnected web of energy that bound all of creation together. As the days turned to weeks, Snow White's power grew exponentially. She found herself able to perform feats of magic that would have seemed impossible to her just a short time ago. But with this growing power came a deepening understanding of the responsibility she bore. One evening, as Snow White sat by a shimmering pool, reflecting on all she had learned, her guide, who she now knew as the Keeper of the Woods, approached her. "You have progressed far in a short time, young one," the Keeper said, its form shifting between male and female as it spoke. "But the greatest challenges still lie ahead. Are you prepared to learn the full truth of your destiny?" Snow White took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I am," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever it is, I'm ready to face it." The Keeper nodded, a hint of sadness in its ageless eyes. With a wave of its hand, the surface of the pool began to ripple and change, showing images from the past, present, and possible futures. Long ago, the Keeper began, there was a great war between the forces of light and darkness. The Dark Fae, led by a queen of unimaginable power, sought to merge the mortal and magical realms, believing that only through dominion over both could true balance be achieved. The Light Fae, along with their human allies, fought against this, arguing that the separation of the realms was necessary for the flourishing of both. The pool showed images of epic battles, magical duels that reshaped landscapes and tore holes in the very fabric of reality. The war ended in stalemate, the Keeper continued. Neither side could fully vanquish the other. And so, a compromise was reached. The realms would remain separate but interconnected. Guardians would be appointed to watch over the boundaries and maintain the balance. And a prophecy was made. The pool's surface shimmered, and Snow White saw an image of herself surrounded by a nimbus of pure white light. It was foretold that one would be born, a child of both realms, who would have the power to either mend the ancient rift or tear it open forever. This child would face a choice that would determine the fate of all the realms. Snow White's heart raced as the implications of the Keeper's words sank in. "And that child is me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Keeper nodded solemnly. "You are the culmination of bloodlines both mortal and Fae, Snow White. Your mother, Isolde, was of the light Fae, though she chose to live as a mortal. And Ravenna..." Snow White's eyes widened in shock. "Ravenna? What does she have to do with this?" "Ravenna is the last queen of the Dark Fae," the Keeper explained. "She has waited centuries for this moment, manipulating events from the shadows. She believes that by corrupting or destroying you, she can finally achieve her ancient goal of merging the realms under her rule." The weight of this revelation settled on Snow White like a physical burden. She thought of her father, still under Ravenna's thrall, of her kingdom suffering under the Dark Fae's indirect rule. And beyond that, she thought of the countless innocents in both realms whose fates rested on her shoulders. "What must I do?" Snow White asked, her voice filled with determination despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. The Keeper's form settled into that of a wizened old man, his eyes filled with compassion. "You must master your powers, unite the forces of both realms, and confront Ravenna. But most importantly, you must look within yourself. For in the end, it will be your heart that determines the outcome of this age-old conflict." As the images in the pool faded, Snow White stood, her mind reeling with all she had learned, but her resolve stronger than ever. "I won't let you down," she declared. "I won't let any of you down. Whatever it takes, I'll find a way to stop Ravenna and bring balance to the realms." The Keeper smiled, a glimmer of hope shining in its ancient eyes. "Then let us continue your training, child of prophecy. For the final battle approaches, and the fate of all hangs in the balance." As Snow White followed the Keeper back to the circle of standing stones, she felt the weight of destiny upon her shoulders. But she also felt a growing sense of purpose and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever sacrifices she might have to make, Snow White knew that she would face them head-on. Little did she know that even as she prepared for her role in the coming conflict, other players were making their moves. In the darkened halls of the castle, Ravenna plotted and schemed. In the depths of the Whispering Woods, Eric the Huntsman wrestled with his conscience and his growing doubts. And in distant corners of both the mortal and magical realms, ancient powers were stirring, drawn by the approach of a confrontation centuries in the making. The stage was set for a battle that would determine the fate of not just Snow White and her kingdom, but of all the realms of existence. The true test of Snow White's courage, compassion, and newfound powers was about to begin. Shadows and allies. While Snow White delved deeper into the mysteries of her magical heritage, the world beyond the heart of the woods continued to turn. In the castle, Ravenna's influence grew ever stronger, her dark magic seeping into the very stones of the fortress. King Leopold, once a strong and just ruler, had become little more than a shell, his will entirely subsumed by Ravenna's enchantments. But not all in the kingdom had fallen under the dark Fae's sway. A resistance movement had begun to form, led by those who remembered the light and justice of Leopold's early reign. Chief among these was William, Snow White's childhood friend and the son of the kingdom's duke. William had grown into a skilled archer and a natural leader, his heart burning with the desire to see his homeland freed from Ravenna's tyranny. He had noticed Snow White's disappearance and, suspecting Ravenna's involvement, had been secretly gathering allies and resources to mount a search for the missing princess. One moonless night, as William met with his fellow conspirators in a hidden cellar beneath the city, an unexpected ally appeared. Eric the huntsman, his face haggard and his eyes haunted, stumbled into their midst. "I know where she is," Eric growled, his voice rough with exhaustion and something that might have been regret. "The princess. Snow White. I know where to find her." The resistance members drew their weapons, suspicious of this sudden appearance. But William held up a hand, studying Eric intently. "Why should we trust you, huntsman?" William asked, his voice cool but not entirely hostile. "You're known to be Ravenna's creature." Eric's laugh was bitter and entirely without humor. "Ravenna's creature? I was that. But I've seen things in those woods, boy. Things that have opened my eyes to the true nature of what we're facing." Over the next hour, Eric recounted his pursuit of Snow White into the Whispering Woods, his glimpse of her miraculous escape into the hidden valley, and his subsequent wanderings through the magical forest. He spoke of encounters with beings of myth and legend, of whispers in the wind that spoke of ancient prophecies and coming battles. "I don't pretend to understand it all," Eric concluded, his eyes meeting William's with an intensity that brooked no argument. "But I know this: Snow White is the key to everything. And if we don't find her, if we don't help her, then all is lost. Not just the kingdom, but everything." William considered Eric's words carefully. He had known Snow White all his life, had seen the innate goodness and strength that resided within her. If anyone could be the focal point of such a momentous destiny, it was her. "Very well, huntsman," William said at last. "We'll trust you, for now. But know this: if you betray us, if you lead us into a trap, there will be nowhere in this world or any other where you can hide from my vengeance." Eric nodded, a glimmer of respect showing in his eyes. "Fair enough. Now, we need to move quickly. Ravenna's power grows by the day, and I fear we have precious little time left." As the resistance began to make preparations for a journey into the Whispering Woods, none of them noticed the raven perched in the shadows of a nearby rooftop. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intelligence as it took wing, flying swiftly towards the castle where Ravenna waited. In her chambers, Ravenna stood before her magical mirror, her beautiful face twisted with a mixture of rage and fear. The mirror's surface swirled with dark energies as it spoke. The pieces moved into place, the mirror intoned, its voice like the whisper of steel across silk. "The prophecy nears its culmination. But beware, my queen. The child of two realms grows stronger by the day. Her power may soon rival your own." Ravenna snarled, dark energies crackling around her clenched fists. "I will not be undone by some half-breed whelp. I have waited centuries for this moment. The merging of the realms will happen, and I shall rule over all." As she raged, the raven flew in through an open window, transforming mid-flight into a dark-clad man with eyes like chips of obsidian. This was Corvus, Ravenna's most trusted spy and assassin. "My queen," Corvus said, dropping to one knee. "I bring news. The huntsman has betrayed us. He has joined with the resistance, and they plan to enter the Whispering Woods in search of the princess." For a moment, Ravenna was still, her face an unreadable mask. Then, slowly, a cruel smile spread across her lips. "Perfect," she purred, her voice filled with malicious glee. "Let them go. Let them find my dear stepdaughter. For in doing so, they will lead us straight to her." Ravenna turned back to the mirror, her eyes glowing with dark power. "Prepare our forces, Corvus. When the time is right, we will strike." And this time, there will be no escape for Snow White or her pitiful allies. As Corvus bowed and left to carry out her orders, Ravenna gazed into the depths of her magical mirror. The surface shimmered, showing glimpses of Snow White training with the guardians in the heart of the woods. "Soon, my dear," Ravenna whispered, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Soon we shall meet again. And then we shall see who truly has the power to shape the destiny of the realms." In the heart of the woods, Snow White paused in her magical exercises, a shiver running down her spine. For a moment, she could have sworn she felt a dark presence watching her. But as quickly as it came, the sensation passed. Shaking off her unease, Snow White returned to her training with renewed determination. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever challenges she might face, she would be ready. For the sake of her father, her kingdom, and all the realms, she had to be. As the forces of light and darkness gathered, as ancient prophecies teetered on the brink of fulfillment, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of existence. The final battle was approaching, and the fate of all hung in the balance. The gathering storm. The Whispering Woods had always been a place of mystery and magic, but never had they hummed with such palpable energy as they did now. It was as if the very trees were holding their breath, waiting for the pivotal moments that were about to unfold. Snow White stood at the center of the Guardian's circle, her eyes closed in concentration. The air around her shimmered with barely contained power as she wove complex patterns of magic, guided by the combined knowledge of her otherworldly teachers. "Good, good," Doc exclaimed, his runic beard swirling with excitement. "Now, focus on the connection between the realms. Feel the boundaries, the places where the veils grow thin." Snow White's brow furrowed as she extended her magical senses. Slowly, like a map unfurling in her mind, she began to perceive the intricate web of energies that connected the mortal world with the realm of the Fae. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a cosmic dance of light and shadow, order and chaos. As her awareness expanded, Snow White gasped. There, at the edges of her magical perception, she felt a disturbance. A group of presences, mostly human, but with one that pulsed with a hint of otherworldly energy, was making its way through the outskirts of the Whispering Woods. "Someone's coming," she said, her eyes snapping open. "A group, and I think William is with them." The Guardians exchanged glances, a mixture of concern and anticipation on their ethereal faces. The Keeper stepped forward, its form settling into that of a wizened old woman. "It seems the threads of fate are drawing tighter," the Keeper mused. "Your old life and your new destiny converge, Snow White. Are you ready to face this junction?" Snow White took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I am," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Whatever comes, I'll face it." As Snow White and the Guardians prepared to meet the approaching group, William led his band of resistance fighters deeper into the woods. Eric the huntsman walked at his side, his keen eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "We're close," Eric muttered, his hand resting on the haft of his axe. "The air feels different here. Charged, like the moment before a lightning strike." William nodded, trying to quell the mix of hope and anxiety that churned in his gut. He had dreamed of this moment, of finding Snow White and bringing her back to lead the fight against Ravenna. But now that it was potentially at hand, he found himself wondering if he was truly prepared for what they might find. As the group pushed through a particularly dense patch of underbrush, they suddenly found themselves in a clearing unlike any they had seen before. 7 massive standing stones formed a circle, and at its center, Snow White, William breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. She stood there, more beautiful than ever, but changed in ways William couldn't quite define. An aura of power surrounded her, and her eyes held a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. At her side stood beings that could only be described as magical, the Seven Guardians. As William and Snow White locked eyes across the clearing, a moment of recognition passed between them. Snow White felt a surge of conflicting emotions: joy at seeing her old friend, anxiety about the clash between her past and her newfound destiny, and concern for what his presence might mean. "William," Snow White said, stepping forward. "How did you find this place?" William gestured to Eric. "We had some unexpected help." "Snow White, what's happening? What is all this?" Snow White took a deep breath, realizing the time had come to bridge the gap between her old life and her new reality. She began to explain her magical heritage, the prophecy, and the true nature of the threat posed by Ravenna. As Snow White spoke, the Guardians watched silently, their ethereal forms shimmering with barely contained power. Eric, for his part, stood at the edge of the clearing, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Meanwhile, in the castle, Ravenna sensed the convergence of energies in the Whispering Woods. With a cruel smile, she began to set her own plans in motion. Dark magic swirled around her as she prepared for the coming confrontation. The story continued to unfold, with Snow White and her allies preparing for the inevitable clash with Ravenna's forces. The narrative explored themes of destiny, the power of choice, and the strength found in unity. As the final battle approached, Snow White faced not only external threats, but also internal struggles. She grappled with the weight of her destiny and the fear of losing herself to the immense power growing within her. The climax of the story saw Snow White confronting Ravenna in an epic magical duel that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of both realms. The outcome hung in the balance as Snow White was forced to make a choice that would determine the fate of all. In the end, it was Snow White's compassion, combined with her newfound powers and the support of her allies, that allowed her to overcome Ravenna's darkness. The realms were saved, but at a great cost. The story concluded with Snow White beginning the process of healing her kingdom and bridging the gap between the mortal and magical worlds. She had embraced her destiny, but on her own terms, forging a path that balanced her dual heritage and promised a new era of harmony between the realms.